because throughout this whole process of the public hearings, we've made some amendments, and quite frankly, I think that the planner is going to go through some additional amendments as based on feedback since our last hearing. Before I turn it over to the planners, it's my understanding that the council advertised for this be a public meeting, so I just want to let you know that if any of the council people want to, I thought we don't have to ask any of them to leave the room or anything like that, because it's been duly advertised. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Daniel.
Yeah. My name is Daniel Hernandez. I'm the town planner here in Morristown.
Can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, not. My name is Daniel Hernandez. I'm the town planner here in Morristown. I want to introduce the team that's here tonight because we knew that this was one of the final presentations of the master plan. And so I wanted to make sure that you had available resources from every perspective that was on the team. But I also want to say that we're going to use tonight a similar format to what we did previously, where we went through sections of or elements of the master plan and identified revisions based on comments that we've heard since at the last meeting and since then. So we'll present, that will be the format that we'll use to present the master plan tonight. And tonight's specific purpose, as I said in the previous two rounds, or previous two public hearings, was that we were going to focus tonight on the land use section of the plan to help people understand what it was, how we approached it, and what the current land use structure is as a framework for moving forward, which the next steps would be the actual zoning ordinance. But tonight we're going to present the framework, which is the master plan for land uses. So I'm going to let my team members introduce themselves, and then I'm going to turn it over to Phil.
Sure. If anybody other than you or Phil are going to do any testify, then we'll just ask to get you sworn. You guys are sworn at the beginning of the year.
Okay, so if they're asked to testify, then they'll
Yes.
introduce themselves. Okay, so I'll turn it over to Phil.
Or you can introduce them.
No,
I mean,
introduce
that's
them.
fine.
Yes.
That's fine.
Introduce them. Why don't we can just swear them in anyway, and that way, if they're along the
Step.
way,
Yes.
we don't have to stop.
Hi, my name's Dr. Wine. I'm a transportation planner for VHB. I was on the project team for the mobility element of the master plan.
Hi, I'm Simon Kowinski. I work at John Perez Companies as a planner.
Right. Why don't the both of you just stand, raise your right hand. You swear or affirm the testimony that you'll give this evening, to the extent you give any this evening, will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Okay.
And just again, name and address for the record, or name for the record.
Simon Kowinski.
Eric DeWine.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And is everybody this work? Can you hear me?
Did you put the switch on the bottom when you moved it?
Underneath the switch.
No, I think it's working now.
It's on.
Hold it.
Yeah.
There's a switch underneath to keep it on.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, my name is Phil Abramson. I'm a planner with the town's planning division and a member of the firm Topology. So we're here tonight to present the master plan, one of the final presentations. It's been going on for quite a couple of years now. And so the master plan in general, there's 4 key points to keep in mind. One, it's a regulatory plan. It's required as a condition precedent to zoning for all municipalities in New Jersey under the municipal land use law. It sets a set of policies for the municipality to guide everything from capital budgeting to zoning decisions to the design of streets. It's a roadmap meant for citizens to help participate in the planning process, to understand what's going on in their neighborhoods in terms of development and preservation. And finally, this is the board that approves it. It is not the council. It's not a council action. It's a planning board action to approve the master plan. So the planning process that we had set out beginning over a year ago had three main phases. The first is what we called discovery. It involved a baseline report, data collection, data gathering, and then the second part was the design, identifying several scenarios, holding charrettes, getting feedback from members of the public, stakeholders, town officials, and finally bringing it all together in a final document that now we've circulated since November of 2013 and obtained a number of comments, made a number of revisions based on public feedback. So tonight, we're going to talk about three things, basically. To give a basic overview of the community form and land use plan, which had always been our plan to do it this evening. Talk about some of the proposed revisions, and I do have a handout here that I will distribute to members of the public when it's time to talk about that. And then three, just to kind of give this board and members of the public an idea about what the next steps might be. So our land use plan, it was a land use and community form plan. The land use and community form plan had 6 basic goals. One, it was healthy residential neighborhoods, thriving commercial and mixed use areas, sustainable pedestrian-friendly building and site design, active connected streets and public spaces, historic preservation, and open and efficient government. The principles that guided us, our team, and the recommendations that we made to this planning board, is that the land use plan creates is a framework that emphasizes 4 things. Preservation of established neighborhoods, established residential neighborhoods specifically, appropriate locations for growth and appropriate locations for preservation, identifying which building heights, scale, form of architecture that would reinforce Morristown's established character that is really so valued here, transitional uses and building forms at the edges of districts and neighborhoods. So one of the things that we began to do, and we looked at the existing zoning plan and made a few observations. The existing zoning plan is highly fractured, highly segmented. The uses, there's 3 different kinds of R3 zones, and what we came to realize is that these uses have been developed over the years, over the decades, around specific uses and users, and they really are an instance of spot zoning in many ways. The community form plan, when we began to lay out the land use framework and the form framework, we took a step back and looked at these areas as districts. How can these become cohesive corridors? How can these areas become cohesive residential neighborhoods? And what zoning designations are inhibiting that type of growth? The next big thing is around mixed-use development. The existing zone plan, despite the fact that Morristown's a downtown, and when you're there, you think of it as a mixed-use environment, the zoning is predominantly single-use districts. Even within the town core, there's very little mixing of residential and non-residential uses. It inhibits walkable neighborhoods and contributes actually to an increase in automobile traffic because people cannot live and work and shop in the same place. And with the exception of the former TVC area, Transit Village Core, the zoning plan really made no accommodations for transit-oriented development. And that was something that was, we heard was important to the town to really build the train station area. And that was a major theme of our land use amendments. And finally, the existing zoning code really provides very little control or guidance to this board or developers in the architecture and the way the buildings look. And the existing Morristown Moving Forward plan, the proposed plan, actually provides those design guidelines. And finally, a lot of growth has happened in Morristown since 2007 when the last zoning amendment was accomplished. And this plan takes into account those things and updates the code to make it more reflective of existing conditions. Now, one thing that's important important to mention is that these are all the form districts that have been proposed by the master plan team. These are not zones. This is not a zoning code. And it's really a framework, and the land use policies are intended to inform a form-based process. They are not zoning districts. No zoning would result in the adoption of the master plan. That's the next step, and it'll be much more detailed. There'll be a much more detailed analysis that will actually have legal effect as zoning. These districts, the district names are widely based on terminology. We put a book there as an example. And that's where these designations come from, is that they're widely accepted around the country as the types of what the form-based codes call transects, the types of communities and the types of development that occur within a community. And the plan really does emphasize the quality and scale of architecture. Another big point of the form-based code, or the Morristown Moving Forward Community Form Plan, is that it emphasizes building types. These building types were selected as the best around Morristown and the best around the region as types of buildings that would accommodate the different types of uses that are recommended as potentially appropriate in those form areas. So this is a building-based plan that starts with a vision of existing buildings. And height have been another common theme in Morristown as part of all of our civic engagement, that residents wanted to keep the existing scale sort of where it was. The existing zoning tops out at 6 stories around the green and the CBD2 zone, and there's no increase. In fact, when you go through most of the zones, all the corollary zones remain the same. Finally, what are the next steps? We do have some revisions here, and I will.
Bill, we're going to be presenting that document. We had to mark it as an exhibit for tonight's hearing, so I would just, when you make reference to it, mark it as Exhibit PB1
Sure.
with today's date.
There's more to be back. There's lots of extras. If people don't mind passing it back, because there's people didn't come back. Thanks.
Assuming everybody has a copy of it. The first is on pages 48 and 77 of the plan, which we didn't pass out the entire plan, it's over 100 pages tonight, was basically a typographical error. What was done as part of this plan was to classify and categorize all the streets in Morristown. These classifications were used for a number of things, but primarily the design of those streets and to determine the types of developments that would be appropriate along those streets. 2 of those streets happen to be named a secondary activity street and a town thoroughfare. As we were going through the plan and we were hearing questions about things, we had come to realize that those 2 were transposed. So the color that appeared that indicated secondary activity street was actually a town thoroughfare, and vice versa. So this will be corrected in a future version of the plan. We propose to insert one additional point on page 76 of the plan, which really is talking about the general land use framework. And I'm just going to read the direct addition, is that this plan sets forth the framework. Should the town council elect to divide form areas into sub-areas or create overlays that contain relatively lower development intensity and/or would achieve other policy goals, it would not be inconsistent with the purpose and intent of this plan for the purposes of NJSA 40:55D-62A. And that legal provision actually requires that all zoning ordinances are substantially consistent with the master plan. We did not want, if we found ourselves down the road in looking at zoning and going between parcel lines, that the council wouldn't be defensible, or it would remain defensible if an area they wanted to make it lower intensity on a certain street or on a certain block. So to create a little bit more shading and diversity in that area, we wanted that to be defensible. In the community forum plan, on Prospect Street, which is right near off Speedwell Avenue, near Catano Street, it was previously, these parcels here were previously zoned as what was TC3, which would have allowed retail to occur there. Those will be modified, and they're actually, correct myself, they were zoned to TC2. They will actually be down zoned to a TC1 to not allow retail to occur there. That is a transitional street. There's existing residential character offices, and new redevelopment happening at the base of Prospect Street. So that area will recommend some non-residential uses on that street, which is very common on that street, but not retail uses. Now going to Maple Street. The frontage on the intersection with Miller, this is the back of St. Peter's Church, and when drawing the boundaries, the zone line was extended all the way to Maple. That was inadvertent. It should have continued as this lower intensity TC1 zone all along Maple. So that will be corrected. The back of that parcel will reflect what is currently the ORC zone. On the Staples parking lot. So here we are at the train station. This is what they call the Staples Shopping Center. And the driveway back here was split zone, not on the lot boundary, to make it into a residential. Based on our reading of the land use law and our understanding of zoning, the whole parcel really should remain of the same intensity. This is not an area that would be suitable or feasible for development, so it would just really remain the status quo and allow the Staples Center to use that site as it currently does.